Hello and welcome to episode 3 of The Fix. Welcome back, or welcome indeed if it's your first time joining us. Today, slightly different sort of episode. We're only going to look at one piece of copy. I thought it was a fascinating piece of copy and lots to kind of tease out of it and lots of different ways of thinking about it. So we're going to get started on that in a second. But it's also, I'm not going to give his name, but it's from an aspiring copywriter who told me they were 17, just getting into the industry and wanted a bit of feedback and guidance. So I thought, well, we'll look at the piece of copy, but then we're going to go on and talk about maybe a few different ways of thinking about getting into the industry. So it's not going to be an exhaustive episode as regards to that, but I thought, hey, let's try and give somebody who's getting started a bit of help. And hopefully there's people out there in the audience, perhaps even you, who is in that situation, just getting started in the industry and looking for a bit of guidance. We'll cover that second. Glenn, hello.
Hello.
I'm going to say hello to you at a different point in every episode. I'm going to share my screen.
Again,
I hope this works.
by episode 20, just at the end, hello.
Can you see my screen? Right, I'm going to read this piece of copy out in full because there's a lot going on here. Hungry deep sea creature offers solution to your dog's limped leg. Great white shark offers the key to saving your dog from a death sentence. One in four dogs out of 77.2 million dogs in the US, 1 in 4 dogs have a form of arthritis and ligament issues due to cruciate ligament problems, where the ligament is degenerating over time, usually due to aging and causing instability. Also means 1 in 4 dogs are having more difficulty with common activities. 1 in 4 dogs are whimpering and struggling to get up on the couch and going up the stairs. Even with more athletic dogs, maybe they can't run as long with their owner. But this doesn't have to be the case anymore, especially with the help of deep sea creatures. Dogs with joint problems no longer have to remain in pain anymore. Why? Great white sharks have come to the rescue. Right, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And rather than throw straight to you, Glenn, I'm going to start this one rather than it being saying.
I need some time to absorb that information anyway.
Well, there's a ton of stuff going on there, but I thought it was fascinating. Now I'm going to give all of this feedback with a view to the person who wrote it being fairly new in the industry, because they told us that. That doesn't mean to say, it's the same feedback I would give to anybody. Now, the first question I would ask myself here is, what am I really trying to sell? Okay. It's not great white sharks. It's not even the thing, however the shark connects to the dog's leg. The big thing that you're selling, sorry, I don't know what the connection is. I didn't dig into the copy deep enough. The big thing you're selling here, well, I think it's twofold. One, if 1 in 4 dogs in the US, I thought that was quite high. 1 in 4 dogs are effectively in agony because of joint pain, okay? So you're okay, that's quite disturbing. Is your dog secretly in agony? Is a kind of deep angle. And what you're selling is freedom. It's freeing a suffering animal from unnecessary pain. Now, I don't have pets, so I'm probably not the best person to talk to a man's relationship with with one's dog. Glenn, you are that man. But I would imagine that the thought that your pet would be in pain without you even realizing it and not living their best life or however, would be quite a strong. People treat their pets like they treat their children in lots of ways. And if somebody said to me, is your child struggling with this, or is your child secretly in agony as a result of X, Y, Z? You have got my interest immediately, because it's an emotional pain point for me too. And I think the whole piece of copy needs to be retracted up to that level, to that core piece of insight that you're going to build your sales piece around, and then be restructured around that. That would be, so I suggest we take it back up to that level and then try and build it back down in this episode. That's how I would go about starting with a piece of copy like this. Glenn, talk to me about your dog.
My dog, Pablo, he's more famous than me, it seems sometimes. But yeah, I mean...
What do you mean? Well, he's more famous.
Yeah, I mean, not that I'm famous.
Because he's in EastEnders.
No, I am a dog owner, and the dog is our child. So I am your reader here, kind of thing. But with regards to the copy, I mean, wow, it's crazy, and I say that as a compliment to this young writer, because I think crazy is where good copy comes from. So you're on the right track. That said, it's probably too crazy on the page for most readers to understand what the hell's going on here. And I agree with what Nick's saying. I think, so what I mean by that is there's two things going on. What Nick's saying, yeah, brilliant. That's like deep copy, well done. Like that's where you want to be going, speaking to those, the pain point of the reader, bringing out the really interesting facts, really good. But I'm almost looking at this beyond the actual copy itself, because I don't think this would be published. It's a bit too crazy. It's like, I don't know what it's relating to, and I don't know what it's relating to for too long into the copy. Even when you're starting to reveal that there's a link between arthritic dogs' legs and sea creatures, I'm still kind of like, what? Where were we getting to this? And I had to kind of scan then to the end to see that there's Wuffle's joint shoes. I don't know if the copywriters maybe made this up as a kind of exercise or something, or whether there is this thing, which is fine. And that's why I really want to be very clear that I think it's a really positive piece of copywriting. And I think despite it being slightly crazy, I think it evidences some really good stuff. I got my job for Agora by writing a short story that I wrote when I was hungover, and wrote as a joke application. It was about how Jesus got his job as the Son of God. He was like this shit carpenter, could not like do anything, but he saw an advert for Son of God, and he just happened to have this really good, nice suit. So that when he went to see God, he like completely screwed up the interview, but God said, look, if you give me your suit, I'll employ you as Son of God. And Jesus still then was like, oh, it is a really nice suit though. Like, didn't want to give up his suit, kind of thing. And then eventually my suit company was like descended from the suit that Jesus was wearing. It was crazy, nonsense kind of copy, in the same way like this is a bit. Luckily, at the other end of that interview process was an equally crazy, silly man who then employed me. But what he saw was that ability to take interesting, or actually take boring facts. 72 million dogs in the US. It's really interesting in one way, but it's also just a fact, it's information. But what you've done is bring out the interesting elements of this. So where it doesn't tie together as copy, the actual act of bringing out that stuff, yeah, that's really interesting, and you're onto something there. But then realistically, to sell a product, you need to then camp that within a stronger idea, and not quite like just hold in your crazy a little bit kind of thing. And I think what Nick was suggesting there was great. The technical bits, just as from a writing point of view, because I know this is kind of, we're almost looking, you can't kind of line edit this piece of copy, because it's one crazy interpretation of an idea, which is really positive, but just gone a little bit too far. But then there is just one, when Nick was reading it out, again, it's another thing, I know I'm a broken record, but read out your copy, read it aloud, because Nick stumbled over that 1 in 4 dogs, and then out of 72 million dogs. I actually I can see what the writer's doing, coming in with that short, snappy 1 in 4 dogs, and then going into the thing. That kind of works, and that repetition of 1 in 4 dogs would work, and repetition is good, but then you need to look at rhythm, and that's why reading stuff aloud works. Because if you said 1 in 4 dogs, exclamation, let me repeat that, 1 in 4 dogs, out of every 4 dogs, one of them is in pain, you get the rhythm of the repetition as well. So that immediately, just as a technical writing thing, that stuck out to me. But I don't think there's almost there's not much more to say than like it's crazy, and it's taking that information, and that's really, really good. I'd be more interested in working with this writer to develop copy than someone who just gave me a dry piece of stuff that looked like copy. And I think, I don't know if that's particularly useful as a thing for like this episode, but I think it is, because I think what it speaks to is getting to the heart of the story, understanding what your story is, what are you writing about, and finding interesting ways to get out of it. You're so much, that writer will be able to create much more interesting copy if you approach it like that, than someone going, right, what are the benefits? What thing? You're trying to get to deeper benefits, and you've tried to do it by linking great white sharks with it and be interesting about that. That's admirable, absolutely admirable, and really useful. But I think you've just kind of gone way and come like all the way over here.
That's quite a common thing, don't you think, Glenn? Because, so what I would say that headline is it's like it's somebody who's developed a hook or hit upon a hook before they've kind of done the logical background legwork and thinking. So probably has gone through the process of, oh, there's this connection between great white sharks and my product. Oh, wow. And then there's been the layer dropped in of like, let's not call them great white sharks, let's call them sea creatures, which is probably just a bit strange. But so trying to work with a way of saying that in a compelling way, this is what we get. However, if you've just got a hook like that, just a weird thing, you're not yet ready to start writing. And so what I would do is say, okay, don't worry about that. Like a hook without an idea, or an idea without a hook, neither of them will work. But especially a hook without an idea, because it will just be weird. It's just like, why are you getting my attention? You haven't yet worked out why you want my attention. And if you don't know, then you're trafficking in my attention in a way that won't work. And none of that's criticism of the writer, because it's more criticism of good, experienced copywriters who put $1 million budgets behind getting people's attention with no idea behind it, of which there are some. However, if we boil it back and say, right, what are we really selling? Well, we're selling something that helps dogs live a better life. As part of that, we've got this idea that they may well be in pain without you even realizing it. And when we trace it back to them, we say, right, before we can talk about a solution, we have to talk about the problem, because the dog is in pain, but you don't know, right? That's what we're going to say. That 1 in 4 dogs got terrible leg pain, and yet they can't tell us because they can't speak. And maybe they're suffering in silence, right? So we have to do a problem solution. We have to. We can't tell them about the solution because the reader doesn't know about the problem yet. Therefore, so we're trying to work it through. We have to get their attention with the problem, because that's where we're going to start. And we're then going to talk about the solution. Right. Okay. We know what the problem is. Dog is suffering in silence. I've done all that thinking. Now unleash the crazy part of your brain that's going to come up with the hook. Okay. Now write me literally hundreds, for a piece of copy like this, hundreds of compelling emotional statements that, like, if your dog could talk, would it be screaming help? That's just the first thing that I thought. Write me 100 of them. And I mean 100, but that's all focused on that part of the piece of copy, right? You're one of them, because you've unleashed that crazy part of your brain, will be a really compelling hook, really compelling statement. Maybe it's a story, such and such, Donovan, the dog, was in agony, blah, 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 blah. Donovan.
Where your mind is working with Donovan.
I don't know. I pulled it down with dog. It was next to dog on the shelf. You know what I mean? Like, I'm going to start. But the broader point I'm making is that you have to do that. You have to put that rubric together mentally. Like, this is what I'm trying to do. This is where I'm going. This is where the emotional pinch point is. This is where copy's going. Now start coming up with hooks. Now do that. Because if you do that bit first, I know it's the fun bit, like, oh, I can come up with a crazy statement. But without all that other stuff, it's kind of pointless. So get yourself focused there. Now work at it, and now it'll work. You'll make that work somewhere, and then we can do some writing. You could clean the writing up slightly. It was quite, repeated the word ligament too much or what have you. But you need to do the groundwork first. And the big, just to kind of talk briefly about getting started in the industry, don't start writing too quickly. Figure it out. That's what we're looking for when we're hiring writers, when we're looking for writers to work with. Me and Glenn are both hired and, frankly, fired tons of writers who didn't work out, not because they were bad people, but because they didn't, meet the requirements of the job. It's the thinking part that's really hard. Some people can think and can't write, but usually you can teach them. Usually you can find a way. But if they can't think something through and you just can't work out how they've ended up writing something, or why has it gone in this direction, then those people fail. So you've got to do the thinking first. Always, always, always. And if you get that right, the rest will follow. But if you don't get that right, and if you jump too quickly to writing hooks, writing headlines, all the different ways of writing, secrets out there on the internet about how you can write better copy, none of it works unless you figured that first bit out, that thinking part. So that's where you need to be spending your time, thinking about how you can sell your product. That's the single greatest piece of advice I could give you. I mean,
it is. I think about one of the best writers I've ever trained, and without doubt, you know him. I don't know. Shame him with his name, but he just, from the moment he came in, he thought, and he thought about things much longer than anyone else, to the point where like, you need to write something kind of thing. But it's like, but I sensed straight away he was thoughtful and would ask questions, and until he had the information in his own head, he would not write anything and would be plagued with doubt and what have you. And it really is a case of thinking. We'll say it so many times, I'm aware of that, but you've just got to get it in your head. I will say one thing before we kind of go on to the general how do you get into copywriting kind of thing, but like, because it reminds me of being in a pub in Putney once, and I think it was yourself, Nick, told me this. We were working on a project. I can't remember what the project was, but you were mentioning about we talked about playing it straight, and when you got something crazy, this just reminded me about that, because I'm aware of copywriting advice being very contradictory. So like you say, oh, you need to have a crazy disruptive headline, and then someone writes a crazy disruptive headline and you're like, no, it's too crazy and disruptive, and it's like, well, you said write crazy and disruptive. So you always kind of, it's about balance. But I think when you've got something crazy, like there's some ideas here that are gonna create interesting headlines, but you need to play that stuff straight sometimes. It's like the with nail and eye kind of thing. Like you need that straight, man. Like, don't play for the last, just tell the really interesting story. If you've got sharks providing the solution for a dog's pain, that's so mental and unbelievable that you need to camp that within a very serious, you're going to be shocked by this, and you can play the kind of straight card on that. This has gone all the way out, because it's almost as if the writer's probably gone, wow, this is crazy, I can write about this and make it crazy. But it's like, no, actually this is a moment to stand back and talk very sensibly about stuff, because you've got to be aware that most people, when they come to copy, I do not want to believe, I'm not going to believe stuff. Oh, sorry, they want to believe, but if you're throwing weird information out of them, they're just going to be like, I can't trust that. Like, their walls are so high against it. So just a reminder to try, if you've got crazy stuff, often playing it straight is the best way to go. So that's just my last final thought on that.
And just go through in general, I'm moving us into the discussion about, I think we'll still refer back to that piece of copy, but the discussion about getting started. When it comes to process, there's lots of material out there, books, courses, whatever, about copywriting, and some of it's good and some of it's bad. But in my experience, most of what people tend to do is this. They read a book about copywriting, okay? And the first part of the book will almost certainly be like, who's your customer? What keeps them up at night? Where are their emotional, pinch points, pain points? What are the benefits of your product, and how do they connect with those earlier bullet points to the reader, right? That's most of what copywriting is. Just thinking about those things. Yes, you've got to think about the world. If you maybe writing an information product, you've got to know, you've got to be curious, all those things. What people tend to do is they skip that bit of the book. Oh yeah, it's easy. That bit, and then they get to the bit of the book that's like 7 secrets for writing better headlines. And they go straight for that bit. And they spend all their time learning about that, like techniques and gimmicks, and some of which are good and some of which are bad. I'm not sort of slamming but they skip the boring bit. Like, oh, I know who my customer is, or I'm not going to think too much about them. But for instance, in this case, this piece of copy, the customer is a dog owner, okay? That's who it is. It's not the dog. The dog doesn't have a credit card. Maybe your dog does.
He does actually have a bank account.
You know what I mean? Like the dog owner, okay. And the problem is that maybe the dog isn't. Just doing that work and actually just always starting there is probably the best piece of advice you can. So when you're reading, there's a way of talking about how to learn. When you're reading about copy, actually do the fundamental stuff, the thinking about the customer, the product, the benefits, the context, and try not to be so seduced by some of the other claims that are made about copywriting, about how to write a headline or blah, 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 stuff like that, secrets and stuff like that. Because although it's good, it's written by a copywriter, so of course it sounds good. But it's also not really what the industry is about. Like, it might put a polish on some of your work, but the best piece of advice tends to be very simple and principle based, not technique based. So they tend to be like, make your marketing valuable. Say something that's of genuine value to your customer and you'll keep their attention for longer. Talk directly to the reader about problems that they're having in their life. Keep it simple around these things and you won't go far wrong. Go too far to the other stuff and you'll end up just, it'll be a great headline with nothing behind it. And that's where I think most people go wrong. So, none of which is a great piece of advice if you're getting started, but it's a way of directing your learning. Trying to keep.
I always say it's kind of an extension of that. I always couch it in just for like the talk I give, like around the ideas area. But I always argue, and it's the same thing as to what you're speaking about, Nick. In my opinion, there's only really there's the world, but there's only really 2 ways you can get ideas. You can either go to the product and like, what is the product, and absolutely ask why about the product as much and find out about it. Or there's the reader, the person who's buying the product. What is their world? So it doesn't need to be any more complicated than that. But this early stage is that when you're sat there, when you're given a product to sell, or to an invitation you have to think, or whatever it is, and it is universal, whether it's free, if it's a charity thing. People often ask if I write charity stuff and whether the principles apply. Yes. Anything that you're trying to persuade someone to take an action, you've either got the product or the person themselves. You don't need to complicate it. How you're going to find that stuff is simply by asking questions about those 2 areas. And invariably, the more you ask that and do that work, you will find the weird stuff. You will find the crazy ideas. The secrets to writing good headlines and all that kind of crap is that actually the real only secret is you just got to ask those questions of either the product or the person. And if you do that, I did a session the other day with a fellow copywriter in the US, and we were sat there. It's the first time we've worked together, so we were kind of just like copy flirting, asking each other like, oh, what you've been doing on this product, blah blah. But we just actually ended up just talking about, how would you use this product? How does your life work, and how does my life work? And from that writer was able to see, oh, I'd not thought about your particular life circumstances and how you might use that product. And he said something about how his life works, and oh, I've not thought about that. And then from that came naturally good, like, little nuggets of ideas that we can then go away and create into copy. But it all just comes from asking those questions. So it's a roundabout saying, I wouldn't like to say this generalization, but I feel like you could, like, all copywriting advice out there generally is a bit kind of waffy and meaningless, because it's all just go and find out more about the product or the person who's buying it. That's all you need to do. But it's just having the discipline to do that. And that is hard. It does take time. And sometimes you're like, oh, I can't find what's different here. But if you just keep digging, you will be able to find it. And that is what will set your stuff apart. If you think about it, how are you going to write original copy without knowing more than the person? You've got to find that stuff. You can't just recreate a compelling piece of thick copy that makes people go, oh yeah, that's really interesting, unless you understand the product. I remember Mike Palmer, a famous direct response copywriter in America, always, I think it was credited to him, but saying you have to become an expert in the product and then find out the one thing that the expert doesn't know. Now that's really pissing hard to do, kind of thing, but that's where you've got to aim for. You've got to find out, you've got to go through that phase of going, wow, I'm amazed by that. But then you've got to remember that the buyer, the reader, they already know that stuff. As the copywriter, you're coming to it fresh. You're like, wow, that's amazing. Then you've got to go, right, okay, that's amazing. But what's the new thing about that? That's why copywriting is hard. But when you're early on in your career, the sooner you can realize that, the better the copy you write. Like, it's just without doubt. I guess it's just trying to learn from our mistakes, if you like. I tried to write cleverly, and I did. I have a natural way I can turn nothing into like a clever piece of writing that, for all intents and purposes, looks good, but it's actually like an illusion. It's not really good. It's just me being a clever writer. My best copy is when I found out what's actually happening, and then that's actually the easiest copy to write and the most successful. So I wish I'd started doing that earlier, rather than just being a clever dick and just like using my powers like evilly, kind of thing. It's finding out the information. So it's boring advice, but yeah, you've got to do the thinking and the time first.
And I think, to be honest, we shouldn't go too much further than that. Maybe we'll do a whole show on getting into the industry. Just one piece of advice I'll give you if you are trying to do that is I wouldn't say write on spec, but find a business you want to work for, either freelance or I would recommend trying to get a job somewhere, and because you'll work under somebody who will strike your copy through and teach you. But however you want to do it is however you want to do it. But look at what they're selling, and then write versions of their adverts, and then send them to the company. That's a great way of getting noticed, because copywriting's hard. Everyone has a shortage of copywriters. Everyone I've ever worked with or met is like, oh God, they're really hard to find, really hard to train. So if you can get yourself noticed and you're half decent, doors will open to you still. So just find pieces of copy. Don't rewrite it in a shallow way, but like find a product and a piece of copy that goes with it that you like. Take it apart, and as at the very least as a training exercise, rewrite it. If nothing comes of it, then it was a good exercise. And if something does come of it, then that is the best way of getting noticed by a company, whether they use that piece of copy or not. That's your calling card. It's the ultimate rule of writing or life is show, don't tell. Don't tell me you're good. Just do it and send it to me. And if it's good, I'll be like, wow, this is a really good piece of copy. We should hire this person. Who are they? And then you're going to tell me who you are then. But that's how I would go about things. Just the same way advertising has always worked. Put your book together. And if you don't have any assignments to work on paid, then you have to do them unpaid. And so find companies you want to work for. Write adverts for them. It's as simple as that. Just get stuck in. But let's do a whole session on, we can do how to apply for a job. We could do getting started as a freelancer. Like, these deserve their own things. And we're only on episode 3, so we shouldn't get too discursive. So I think we should wrap up there. I mean, hopefully that was useful on a number of levels to you. As always, thank you very much to the writer who sent that in. Very brave to send a piece of copy in when you're just getting started, 17 years old. So thank you very much. And
keep going. I would say, back to that copy. I think really interesting mind at work, and I don't mean that in a like weird way. It's like genuinely, like, you've just got to keep working, doing that stuff. I think it's positive. I think you've got a greater chance than a lot of aspiring copywriters. So keep going.
Agreed. As always, the email address to write to us is feedback@longcopymasterclass.com. We'll be back next Monday. In the meantime, send us stuff. The more you send, the more likely we are to review it, or to help out with the problem that you're having, or to do a whole show around it, or whatever. You know, we're lazy. We don't want to have to come up with our own ideas. We want to do these shows based around the copy that you are working on, the problems that you're trying to solve. So write in feedback@longcopymasterclass.com. And as I said last week, if you're enjoying these episodes, these shows, and you think they're useful or valuable, you can do us a favor by sharing them with people, whether that's posting it or just sharing it directly, and you diffuse it out into the world with people who you think would value it. If you don't think it's valuable, then don't do that. That's fine. You're under no obligation. Thank you very much, Glenn. We will be back in a week's time. That email address is feedback@longcopymasterclass.com. We will see you again next Monday. Thank you.
I want to say one more thing, because I think the way it works is our videos, it looks like this window goes into your window, and people are now getting a narrative for that. And I think one episode, somehow we have to cross through into that window, and I will just like climb into your house, which is what, 200 miles away, maybe? I don't know.
At least, yeah. But, I also noticed you referred to me as contractually obliged to always be standing yes. With a mirror behind me as well, which is...
I'm standing too, you see, because I'm the older, so I get to take the seat. But
I'm having a studio built in my back garden as we speak, so at some point this will all be nicer looking, but we've gone for good content over good production.
I'll stand up one week. Maybe I am stood up, and I just look like bent over all the time.
Tiny little legs.
I'll stand up as we go. See you.
Okay. Cheers, everyone. See you next week, and goodbye.